This is a story called Teasing Tommy, written by Daryl Neat in 1984 through Save the Nation Publications. It was told to his children probably many years before 1984, but he finally put it to print by then. The cover page says, "Dedicated to faith, fortune, and sacred honor, each a vestige worth a ponder, and to my children whose bright eyes and bushy tails gave inspiration to this wondering soul." Teasing Tommy. It was a pleasant hill, they said, and that is how this small community got its name. The pioneers moved here a long time ago, and Tommy's grandfather was one of them. Tommy loved his grandfather. They spent many hours together, especially after Tommy's mother and father divorced. Grandpa loved Tommy too, and he often told Tommy great stories from the Bible. It almost seemed that Tommy's grandfather knew God in a special way. On Tommy's 9th birthday, his grandfather bought him a very special gift. Tommy opened the box with great excitement. "Wow," Tommy said, "a watch! I've always wanted a watch." "Thank you, Grandpa." Tommy looked at the watch. As if he placed it on his wrist, it beeped a couple of times, and the hands seemed to sparkle. I think there was something kind of special about that watch. Tommy's grandfather's eyes kind of sparkled too, as he watched Tommy put the watch on. Teasing Tommy, what a name. I guess you know that Tommy's name had something to do with the way he acted. Tommy could play some pretty mean tricks sometimes. I'm not sure why Tommy thought those tricks were funny, but he did, and other kids would try to stay out of his way. When school started that Monday, Tommy dressed in his usual blue jeans and pullover shirt. As he walked out of his bedroom, he reached down and put on his new watch. Boy, thought Tommy, I bet all the kids in school are going to wish they had a watch like this. Tommy grabbed the lunch his mom made and darted out the door to catch the bus. The bus stop was right out in front of Tommy's house. Most of the neighborhood kids would meet at Tommy's mailbox and wait for bus number 7 to pull up. Kenny, Joan, Sherry, and Tammy were there. Tommy ran up behind them and excitedly showed them his new watch. Joan was a little afraid that it might squirt her or shock her or something. At school, Tommy took his books to his locker like usual. On the way, he saw Betty. Betty was walking towards her locker carrying all of her homework and books for class. Tommy didn't like Betty. He never really talked to her very much, but he knew he didn't like her. Tommy slid behind a few kids walking down the hall, and after looking around for teachers, he sneaked up behind Betty, and he reached through her arms from behind. He knocked all of her books onto the floor. Tommy ran away laughing. As Tommy ran, he heard a strange noise. It wasn't the class buzzer. It wasn't the fire alarm. Thought Tommy. I wonder where that beeping is coming from. Tommy slid to a stop and sat on the bench outside the main hall. Just then, something caught his eye. The watch his grandfather gave him was beeping, and the hands started flashing. As Tommy looked curiously at this strange happening, the face of his watch became blue, like the sky. Tommy saw clouds floating back and forth. There in the midst of the clouds, Tommy saw something that looked kind of like a large castle. Tommy gasped. "My grandpa got me some kind of movie watch. Wow, this is cool." As Tommy looked at the picture, he could hardly believe what his eyes saw. There was a huge shining castle. It was in between the clouds. As they parted, he could see a large set of steps going all the way to the door. There on the steps was a boy about his age. As Tommy looked closer at the boy, he realized that it was him. "What?" said Tommy. "What am I doing in this movie?" He watched himself climb the steps and walk up the large brass door. As he approached the door, it was opened by two very large angels, who smiled as they looked down at Tommy. Inside the door, he saw a giant throne. "Wow," thought Tommy, "I'm going to go see the king and queen. But what are those angels doing here?" Tommy looked on as he saw himself walk up the steps to the giant throne. There on the throne was someone, but it wasn't a regular king. It was Jesus. As Tommy approached the throne, Jesus stood up. He had several Bibles and name books in his hands. Tommy looked up for a minute and thought to himself, how could this be happening? When the Tommy in the movie got close to Jesus, he reached out his hand. "I'm going to shake Jesus' hand," Tommy yelled. As he watched, he saw the little Tommy didn't shake Jesus' hand. He reached up and knocked all the books out of Jesus' hands, and then ran away. "What?" said Tommy. "I wouldn't do that." Then the class bell rang. Tommy's watch just looked normal again. Thought Tommy. "I'll have to check this out later and see if I can rewind that movie." Tommy went on to Mr. Beebe's science class. He took his regular seat in the back of the class, but today Tommy was quieter than usual. He sat very still, looking out the window and thinking about his grandfather and the strange new watch he gave him. At lunch time, Tommy bolted into the cafeteria, grabbed a tray, and sat down by the pop machine. While Tommy was eating, Bryce, that weird kid in math, came in and sat down across from Tommy to finish his ice cream. Bryce made some kind of strange slurping noise whenever he ate. Slurp, slurp. Tommy's eyes got big, and anger filled his heart. "I hate that sound," Tommy said to himself. "Can't that nerd eat somewhere else?" Tommy jumped up from the table. He walked over and dumped his food in the garbage. As he turned to go out, he walked back and shoved Bryce by the back of the head, pushing his face into his bowl of ice cream. Bryce looked up. His face was covered with melted ice cream. Tommy laughed and walked out to the courtyard. As Tommy exited the door, he heard that strange beeping sound again. "Hey, another movie! This is cool," thought Tommy as he sat down to see a new scene unfold. On his watch, he saw angels milling around. There off to the side was a parlor. There was a great table. Sitting at the table were people. Tommy thought that he recognized from some of the stories his grandfather had told him. At the head of the table was Jesus again. Tommy watched as he saw himself walk into the parlor. The guests greeted him. Tommy yelled, "Okay, go tell Jesus you're sorry about the books. Tell him it must have been some kind of dumb accident. I know that must be what I'm going to do. Hey, maybe you, well, whoever you are, maybe you should just bow down and pray or something." Tommy watched as the movie played on. There he was in the very throne room of heaven, attending a great dinner, and with such special guests, especially Jesus. Tommy wondered what would happen. As he watched, he saw Tommy walk around the table behind Jesus. Jesus was sitting, having some soup. Tommy started to get a little nervous as he watched himself walk up behind the King of the universe. What would he do now? What would he say? Tommy wondered out loud. Suddenly he saw the small figure grab Jesus' head from behind and shove his face into his bowl of soup. "No!" Tommy screamed. "You stupid kid! That's Jesus there! You can't treat him like that!" Tommy saw the scene fade. He looked up and saw several kids staring at him from across the courtyard. Tommy buried his head in his knees, and for the first time in a long time, he cried. As Tommy cried, there were other pictures which ran through his mind. I wonder what Tommy was thinking about. Do you know? If you were Tommy, what would you do? Why was this happening to Tommy? Read Matthew 25:45. "Then shall he answer them, saying, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you did it not to one of the least of these, you did it not to me." What can we learn from this story and from the verse above? Tommy thought much about his experience. He did not understand how the watch could make those movies, but he did understand how he could change the way that he treated others. And now he knew why he should change the way he treated others. He knows now that whatsoever you do to the least of these my brothers, you've done unto me. At school, Tommy's friends noticed that something was different about Tommy. Often he would grab them from behind or begin to pull some trick on them, and then he would look up, get a smile on his face, pat them on the shoulder, and say how he appreciated them. What a change in a boy named Tommy. Teasing Tommy? Soon people began just to call him Tommy. Tommy kept the watch and would often loan it to friends he thought could use a good lesson in kindness, and a good lesson they got.